To do the Crocheted Provisional cast on, what you're going to need is the needles that you're going to knit your project with, the yarn you're going to knit your project with, some waste yarn about the same size as your working yarn, a crochet hook that's about the same size as the needles that you're going to use. My crochet hook's a little bit bigger, but that's okay. You can go up and down a couple sizes and it's fine. And you're also going to need a pair of scissors. So what we're going to do is we're going to start with one of our needles and our crochet hook and our scrap yarn. And this can be any type of yarn. You want to just make sure it's nice and smooth, it's not too hairy or too bumpy or anything like that. Because we're going to remove this later from our work, it needs to be easy to remove, so nothing furry. I'm going to start with a slip knot and put that on my crochet hook. And I'm going to take one of my needles that I'm going to use to knit my project with, and I'm going to hold my needle and my crochet hook parallel to each other. My crochet hook is on the right side, my needle's on the left, and my yarn is behind the work, so it's behind, not in front. So what we're going to do is I'm going to hold my yarn off to the left as I would if I were going to crochet, and I'm going to use my crochet hook, and I'm sort of keeping a little tension on this yarn back here, and I'm going to bring the crochet hook in front of the needle, grab the yarn coming off my index finger, pull it through like a chain, like that, and then I'm going to move my yarn to the back again. So we're going to come forward, grab the yarn, pull it through, yarn to the back. And I'm going to continue that. So each time we do that, we're wrapping the yarn around the needle and we're sort of making a stitch on the needle while we're chaining. And you can cast on as many stitches as you want this way. It's going to make it easier to remove later because it's a crochet chain. We can sort of just unchain it by pulling on it, and I'll show you how that works. So yarn to the back, crochet hook comes forward, crosses over, grabs the yarn, pulls it through, yarn to the back. So I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I'm going to cast on a few more. You can cast on as many as your pattern calls for. So we'll call it 10 stitches. And to finish the cast on, what we're going to do is we're going to trim our scrap yarn. Just cut it, leave a little tail. Doesn't need to be really long. We're not going to really do anything with it. I'm going to pull this loop up on my crochet hook a little bit bigger. I'm going to feed my cut end through that loop, and I'm going to pull it up. And you don't want to pull it too tight because we need to be able to take that out later. So I'm leaving it a little bit loose. Can you see that? So now we've got however many stitches we need cast onto our needle tip, and I'm going to grab my working yarn, the yarn I'm going to knit my project with. And regardless of what your stitch pattern is, you know, if you're going to do ribbing or if you're going to do, you know, a lace pattern or whatever, we need to get our working yarn on our needles. So we're going to just knit this first row with our working yarn. Regardless of whatever your stitch pattern is going to be, we need to do just a plain knit row first, and that's just going to get our working yarn onto our needles. So I'm just knitting straight across my row. Like that. And now my green yarn's on the needle, I can now continue with whatever my pattern is. So I'm going to knit a couple rows so I have a little fabric, and then I'm going to come back and show you how to remove the crochet chain. So I've just knitted a few rows. You would continue in your pattern until it said it was time to take out the provisional cast on. And to do that, we're going to find the end of our crochet chain where we left that little knot, which is going to be right here. We're going to remove that knot we tied. So this is why we didn't want to pull it too tight when we did that, because we need to be able to pick it out. So I'm just gonna get that out of there. And now when you pull on a crochet chain, it just unravels. And as we do that and it starts unraveling, these little stitches from down here are going to start popping out, and they're going to become what we call live stitches, meaning that you can knit off of them or you can use them to graft or whatever your pattern needs you to do with them. So I'm going to start pulling on my waste yarn very slowly until I can see a stitch pop out. And it's going to be right there. So when I pull on this, you can see that little green stitch right there that's just hanging out. I'm going to take my other needle and I'm going to put it right through that stitch so it doesn't run away. And I'm going to continue doing that. So I'm going to it helps if I sort of pinch right underneath where that chain is, and if I lift up I can sort of see the stitch where it's going to come out. So I'm going to pinch right there, pull it out. There's my stitch, put that on my needle, and I'm going to continue doing that all the way across my row. Another thing you can do is if you pull up on your chain and you can see the stitch where your yarn's going in right there, I could put my needle tip through it first, so just from front to back right through that green stitch, then pull the yarn out and it will already have been on my needle. So I can do that. If I pick it up first, then they're not sort of hanging in the balance. So I'm just sort of pulling up on my waste yarn. I can see that stitch right under the needle right there. Put my needle in, pull it out. And I'm continue that all the way across my row until I've removed all of my waste yarn. And there's one more here at the end, like that. Okay, so now I've got the stitches from my cast on, the stitches from my project. You might be like grafting the two together to make a tube, but whatever your pattern says to do with these stitches at that point, that's how you would get them. And that's how to do the crocheted provisional cast on.